ours. But soldiers' feet were wet too on the 6th and 7th. It had been raining incessantly leading up to the battle. One of the reasons Grant lands at Pittsburg Landing is because it is a high point on the river that boats can still land even when the river's a flood stage. And it has a road going to Corinth, the eventual objective. Really, Pittsburg Landing is the only place Grant can put his army, and that's why he's here. This ground has no strategic value whatsoever outside of that. Here where we are, this is Sarah Bell's farm, part of it at least, Sarah Bell's old cotton field here. So springtime, it would be dirt. She doesn't have anything growing here at the moment. It's going to be open. Behind you, the cabin we walked past, that belongs to her son-in-law, William Mance George. That is the only structure on the park that was here at the time of the battle. It wasn't actually sitting where it is today. It was destroyed during the fighting. The original cabin, Mr. George did not want to move from his homestead here, so he purchased another cabin from Lewis Wicker and moved that from near the park entrance to where we see it today. But
sixth great grandfather.
Excellent. So you have a good connection to it. So that is, probably one of the most unique resources we have on this battlefield, because it was here to witness everything that happened here in 1862 and all the way up to the park's creation in the 1890s. Here on the morning of the 6th, Stephen Hurlbut, Brigadier General, is going to begin deploying his 4th Division in this field. Now, Hurlbut's kind of an interesting guy. That's a picture of him if you've never seen him before. He is the son of New England parents who had moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where young Stephen is born. His father will own and enslave 9 different people as Stephen is growing up, while at the same time telling Stephen slavery is a moral wrong. Never mind that the family's profiting from it right now. As Stephen grows up, he'll decide he wants to be a lawyer. He will sit the bar, he'll become a lawyer in Charleston, South Carolina, and part of his business is going to be helping people in debt discharge it by selling their enslaved people. It'll only be after the war Stephen tells people he's always been against slavery, although he profited off of it throughout his life living in Charleston. He will join a militia unit for the Seminole War in Florida. He'll leave Charleston as a sergeant. He won't see any action in Florida, but he will meet a young lieutenant named William Tecumseh Sherman. He'll return home a lieutenant in that militia company. As he grows into young adulthood, into his 20s, he'll develop a reputation around Charleston. He's an active member of the Whig Party. He joins fraternal organizations. He begins drinking heavily, as he will throughout his life. He has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and he will become a bad gambler. Not that he just loves gambling all the time, but he's bad at it. He likes to play cards, and he loses at cards frequently. In the mid to late 1840s, he eventually needs some money and goes to a fellow Whig in Charleston for a loan. And this doctor gives him a check. Hurlbut cashes that check, decides he wants more money, so he forges a renewal note for that check, goes to the bank and withdraws the same amount again out of this doctor's account. And some mutual friends approach Hurlbut and tell him it would be in your best interest if you left town. So he will flee from South Carolina, head north to Pennsylvania, New York area, where he starts moving west. And eventually he will stop in Belvidere, Illinois, not because he had any particular affinity for Belvidere. It just happens to be where he was when he ran out of money. And he will set up shop there as a lawyer. And he will begin to develop, surprisingly enough, a pretty good reputation around Belvidere. He becomes the county's foremost lawyer. He starts dabbling in Illinois politics, leaves the Whig Party, joins the Republican Party, gives speeches alongside Abraham Lincoln. He goes to the Illinois State House. He develops a reputation down in Springfield as a really good orator, a great speaker, and a matchless tactician, kind of ruthless behind-the-scenes politicking. He has a good sense for that sort of thing. But what he really wants to do is serve in Congress. And he will run for the House of Representatives again and again and again and lose to somebody named Elihu Washburn, who ends up backing Grant. It's a very one-sided rivalry Hurlbut has with Washburn. Hurlbut is dead set on kicking Washburn out, and Washburn wonders who this other lawyer is he's supposed to be worried about. Very one-sided. But in 1861, when the war breaks out and Lincoln is looking for people to serve as generals, Illinois Republicans go to Lincoln and they push for Hurlbut to be brought into the Army. One of the things he had done in Belvedere was found a militia company. And militia companies at that time, it was an excuse for the men around town to get together once a month, dress up in a fancy uniform, march around, drink, and shoot the breeze. Hurlbut, though, has a knack for training and drilling soldiers, and his company is a very well-respected and well-drilled group of soldiers. He's a decent, when he's not drinking, leader of men. In 1861, when Lincoln needs help, he is kind of reluctant to bring Hurlbut into the Army. He knows Hurlbut has a reputation for drinking, but eventually the political pressure grows to the point where in the late summer of 61, Hurlbut's given a star. He comes out west. He will be assigned to Grant's Army of the Tennessee, command of the 4th Division. And on the morning of the 6th, as he rides into this field at the head of his men shortly after 9 a.m., this is going to be his first experience under fire. He'll make a few mistakes. About 9 o'clock, he initially deploys the 2 brigades he has with him, one along the Hamburg-Purdy Road to the front there, the other facing west along this tree line. There'll be some long-range skirmishing with Confederates across the ravine in the camps of the 18th Wisconsin, and Hurlbut's going to figure out pretty early on that this isn't the best position, and he will pull the division back along this line south of the Peach Orchard. It shortens his line, and it gives his men this massive, clear field of fire they can take advantage of. There are some disasters before that can occur, though. One of the units that deploys forward with him is the 13th Ohio Battery, and they would have been positioned. So we have those 2 tablets over there. You can see blue square. The one to the left, just in the tree line. 13th Ohio, brand new unit. And they'll come galloping into the field. They'll deploy their guns. And at this point, there are some Confederate gunners across the way who are bringing the division under fire. One of their rounds strikes an ammunition chest in the 13th Ohio. And depending on which source you read, it either explodes or creates a big enough racket that every single man in the 13th Ohio drops what they're doing. They turn around and they run off towards the landing. They will not be seen until Tuesday morning when they're hungry and they come out looking for food. The battery is left alone. The horses are still in their harnesses. Some of the infantry will have to step back, cut the horses out of their harnesses. Horses immediately take after the rest of the battery. The infantry will spike the guns. Take something metal, put it in the vent hole at the back, snap it off so that the gun can't be used. Those 6 guns are going to be a total loss for the Federal Army. They'll be captured by the end of the day. Now, there are plenty of witnesses around here to see this. One of them is in the 3rd Iowa Infantry, who will write home to his newspaper to describe to the good people back home in Iowa what had happened. It says, a battery of artillery had come up and attempted to form on our left. But before the guns were in readiness, the enemy opened on them with their artillery. In truth, it was a tremendous fire, but unsophisticated. I was astonished beyond measure to see the artillerymen leave their guns and take to their heels, cutting dirt as if all the infernal fiends were after them. And that, too, before they had fired a shot. It does seem that if the infantry could stand the fire, the artillery could as well. There isn't a lot of respect for the 13th Ohio Battery. In the 1890s, when the park is established and the state of Ohio is told they can put monuments up on this battlefield, the state of Ohio will decide to put up a monument for each and every unit that served here. They had 35 units here at Shiloh. They will put up 34 monuments. 13th Ohio does not get one because of their performance here. That battery will be disbanded and the artillerymen sent off to other Ohio units as needed. Not everything is harmonious here in the 4th Division on the morning of April 6th. Commander of the 41st Illinois Infantry, Isaac Pugh, had been enjoying command of his brigade as the senior colonel. Right up until a few days before the battle, when the army's reorganized and the 3rd Iowa joins the brigade. Pugh is then superseded by Nelson Williams, who's the colonel of the 3rd Iowa. And Pugh really doesn't like that. Feels like he's been stripped of his authority. There's a conspiracy against him. He has, he's a good husband. He writes home to his wife frequently So there are good letters to read from Pew. One of them, shortly after he's superseded, he writes home a long rant to his wife and kind of goes off on General Hurlbut and describes him. General Hurlbut is a drunkard and is drunk all the time when he can get anything to get drunk on. No love lost between those two men. He is convinced that because Colonel Williams of the 3rd Iowa is a drinking buddy of Hurlbut's, that's why the 3rd Iowa was added to the brigade. Pew will go on to accuse Colonel Williams and the men of the 3rd Iowa of having been cowards in a previous engagement. And he threatens his wife, court-martial and consequences be damned. If Colonel Williams shows the white feather at all, I will take command of this brigade and see it through the rest of the battle. Luckily enough for Colonel Pew, as the men are redeploying from their initial forward positions to this more compact line to the back, one of those Confederate artillery rounds strikes the ground underneath Colonel Nelson Williams' horse. It will throw Colonel Williams from the horse. He's knocked senseless and taken to the rear, and Pew gets to take command of his brigade back. 41st will be commanded for most of the battle by the Lieutenant Colonel Ansel Tupper, who's very well loved by the men under his command. So, between 9 and 11:30, the units here get shuffled back around. There's some skirmishing that goes on. These trees off to your left here between us and the Hamburg-Purdy Road, our fields here are pretty much the same size and shape as they would have been during the battle in 1862. That is one of the exceptions where those trees are. That would have been a mule lot and some of the farm buildings for the Sarah Bell farm. There are skirmishers from the 41st Illinois deployed in that farmyard, basically, and they're going to be trading fire with Confederates on the other side of the road. And before the Confederate assaults begin, Confederate skirmishers are going to push those Federal skirmishers out of her farm buildings and back towards the main line. Give you an idea of how this main assault in the Peach Orchard area is built up to. Any questions so far? Okay, we'll make our way down the battle line and take a look at some of the action that occurs here. State of Illinois, they have a big state monument over by the crossroads, but they also put up individual monuments for each unit where they're the most heavily engaged. So you can see off to the right, 32nd Illinois, 28th, 41st, and Willard's Battery further down. So you get an idea of what this battle line would have looked like here. And this is this second position that Hurlbut establishes. And this is going to be where the main Confederate assaults are stymied for much of the day. That first major assault comes at about 11:30. William Stevens' brigade and John Bowen's come crashing through the woods off to the right. The 44th Indiana is in the woods past the 3rd Iowa. They're part of the Hornet's Nest. It's thick, it's overgrown. Again, one of the few places on the battlefield where it is as overgrown as it actually was in 1862. Most of the rest of the forest would have been old growth, pretty open. You could have seen 200 or 300 yards in most places, except for in there in the Hornet's Nest. Those charges are going to start over on the right. 44th Indiana is going to kind of take the brunt of it, but they will do a decent job at forcing their Confederate attackers back. Their colonel, Hugh Reed, is going to be overseeing, I'll pass that around, take a good look at Colonel Reed. He's going to be superintending the defense in that area. It's thick, it's brushy, it's been wet, the soldiers can't see very far, but they're mostly armed with smoothbore muskets, so close range weapons firing at one another. And the rate of fire over there is going to be so intense that wet, dry underbrush or deadfall is going to end up catching fire. It'll be one of the places on the battlefield that catches fire. And there is a sketch artist here on the battlefield, Henry Lovey. He will sketch what he sees on the front of the 44th Indiana. So that's the sketch he makes, and this is how the newspaper refined it to be printed. So you can compare and contrast the two as they make their way around. Now, after the fact, as Colonel Reed writes his report, I think he kind of puffs himself up a little bit. He describes the fighting. Our men fought as coolly and effectively as if it had always been their occupation. They required no urging. I found it irksome enough sitting on my horse with nothing to do but be shot at. I think he's overstating it, because the 44th Indiana, during their stand against Stevens and Bowen's brigades, they're going to lose 39 color bearers. 7 killed, 32 wounded. It is intense fighting over there, but he will hold on to his position and keep the division attached to the rest of the units of the Army of the Tennessee that are fighting in the thick of the hornet's nest. Now, a lot of the action is going to drift slowly to the Confederate right and the Federal left across this wide open space. Winfield Statham's brigade will make attacks. 28th Illinois here is going to do a terrific job of throwing back those Confederates again and again. Confederates won't be daunted. They will reform, and they're going to come charging back across this field, this wide open space. 28th Illinois, they had, earlier in the morning when they were deployed across the field, they had taken a crate of ammunition with them, about 1,000 rounds. A soldier at this time in combat, they would have been carrying with them 40 rounds of ammunition in their cartridge box. If you want to get a feel for 40 rounds of ammunition, these are inert cartridges. That's what these guys would have had on their hip as they're fighting. It's hefty. And these soldiers, they would have been drilled and trained to fire 3 rounds per minute. So you can do the math. 40 rounds on you, 3 rounds a minute, you're going to burn through that ammunition under 16 minutes. And sure enough, the men of the 28th, their resupply is going to fail, and their cartridge boxes are going to start running empty. As they can see Confederates preparing to charge them again, starting to rally, they're going to have to do something about that, because no man here wants to defend his position with just his bayonet and wait for the fight to get to him. Officers are going to ask for volunteers when they remember they have 1,000 rounds sitting out there in no man's land. And there are going to be 2 young men who raise their hand and volunteer to run out there and grab those 1,000 rounds and bring them back so the regiment can continue to defend itself. 2 friends from Illinois who signed up together, Elwood Williams and William Price. This is Private Elwood Williams. 2 men are going to drop their guns back here behind the firing line. They'll go rushing out into no man's land, and much to Elwood's dismay, he will see his friend William go down with a wound. He's shot as they cross the field. Elwood will get to that box of cartridges. He will grab it, heft it up on one of his shoulders, weighs about 106 pounds, and he will come running back across the field with that, drop it behind the lines. His fellow soldiers are going to start grabbing cartridges out of there, refilling their boxes, and without missing a beat, Elwood turns around and he runs back out between the 2 battle lines. His friend is out there, and he's going to grab William, pick him up, and carry him back here to the regiment. He will not stop when he gets back here to the battle line, though. Elwood carries William all the way back to Pittsburg Landing looking for medical help. Unfortunately, William will pass away from his wounds. And in September 1897, the United States Congress gives Elwood Williams the Medal of Honor for his actions here on the battlefield. This is one of the places on the Civil War battlefield where the country's highest military honor was earned. And that's Elwood getting ammunition for his friends and taking his best friend from back home back to find some medical help and out of danger. 28th is going to hold on. The fighting will continue, moving off to these men's left. Gets in front of the 41st Illinois over there. For a lot of the morning, they've been the Army's left flank. There really isn't anybody off to the left of them. They can hear some of that fighting with Stewart's brigade off in the ravines. They know that's getting closer, but they look out across that small field to the tree line, and they don't see anybody else. And they know it's a great opportunity for the Confederates to flank them and turn this line, force the rest of the division to fall back. They're going to put up as good of a defense as they can. They're going to look out in front here at Sarah Bell's mule lot there where those trees are today. One of the soldiers describes in a letter home what it looked like as the Confederates began moving in this position. A brigade leaped the fence. Line after line formed on the opposite side of the field. It was a splendid sight, those men in the face of death closing and dressing their ranks, hedges of bayonets gleaming above them, and their proud banners waving in the breeze. Our guns, shotted with canister, made great gaps in their ranks, which rapidly closed, not a man faltering in his place. And now the field officers waved their hats. A shout arose in that column. Splendidly a line took the double quick and moved on magnificently. We could not repress exclamations of admiration. That Confederate line will come slamming into the 41st Illinois. They're going to be thrown back a little ways, but not before that regiment suffers a loss. That Lieutenant Colonel Ansel Tupper, he had been well liked by the men under his command, a well-respected officer. An unsigned letter we have in our files here at the park describes what's going on the federal side of the line. All this time, the 41st were fighting as well as they knew how when word was passed along our line that Colonel Tupper had fallen, shot through the head. This infuriated the men, and they now fought like perfect devils, cheered on by Major Warner, who showed himself every inch the soldier. At that time, for the men on this line, the fighting is starting to feel desperate. They've been able to hold on for much of the morning. As we get into the early afternoon, shortly after the noon hour, though, the exhaustion they're feeling is starting to tell, and this line is starting to get weaker as the afternoon goes on. But luckily for the men here in the Peach Orchard, there are reinforcements coming down the road here back from the landing. John MacArthur's Illinois regiments are moving up. The 9th Illinois and the 12th Illinois, and a detached regiment from Sweeney's brigade, the 50th Illinois. And they're going to extend Hurlbut's left flank off into the woods as Stewart's brigade is pushed out of there. And they become the new left flank of the Federal Army. And that is our next stop, unless you all have any questions here on the battlefield. This part of it, at least.
Did they have any kind of cover? Or were they standing here in the open?
Peach trees would have been here. They would have been under the peach trees to an extent. There really isn't much between them and the Confederates.
Yeah, okay, they weren't open to be seen necessarily, but yeah.
Yeah, and initially they're laying down. They'll be standing up, and for most of the day, each side knows exactly where the other is. It's this open field that is their defense, essentially. A lot of these units have smoothbore 69 caliber weapons. They're firing buck and ball, big round musket ball, 3 small buckshot. So even if they're not necessarily aiming for somebody in particular, they're not the most accurate weapons, they're sending a lot of metal across this field. And even if that buckshot strikes somebody, it's not necessarily going to be lethal, but it is going to send some of the Confederates off the field. A lot of these Confederate units have fairly new Enfield rifles that have just come in through the blockade. And so you do have this disparity in weapons being used, but nobody at this time is really training men how to use the fancy sights on the Enfield or judge distance. So the guys with the smoothbore firing buck and ball, they have a little bit of an advantage because it's point and shoot and not trying to aim, and they have 4 rounds going down range. And that's going to play, in my untutored experience with the military, that's going to play into the defense here, is just having that much more metal they can send against the enemy. We'll make our way across the road and into the woods a little ways. As far as we're going to hike today, but I would encourage any of you who want an adventure to come back over here on your own time. Walk the edge of this ravine, go down into it. This is really difficult terrain to maneuver over. And the shoes that the men are issued at this time, these brogans, they're slippery. It's a smooth leather bottom if you don't have a little metal piece on your heel there. So this is a difficult place to be. John MacArthur's 3 regiments will move into position here. We're at the 9th Illinois Monument, where they had their heaviest fighting of the battle. And MacArthur's line is going to curve along the lip of this ravine, moving off to your left there.
Is that what the monument is?
Yeah, that'll be the 12th Illinois you can see through there. And if you kept going, you eventually get to the 50th Illinois, holding the extreme left. By 12:30, there pretty much isn't any resistance from David Stewart's brigades. They've given it up for the day.
Where are they in comparison to us here?
Forward and to your left.
Okay.
By a few hundred yards.
Okay.
Yeah. You could walk it, but after all that rain last night, it's going to be wet at the bottom of these ravines. So today might not be the best day to do that. It's going to be James Chalmers and John Jackson's units that move against this position. The area is open enough that Albert Sidney Johnston, he is able to see the attacks against this position from just the other side of the road over there, south of Hamburg-Purdy. Now he's going to be able to watch Confederates make multiple attempts to dislodge the Federals from this position. And for the most part, this is a pretty strong defensive place to be. 9th Illinois is going to keep the Confederates under a sustained fire for 90 minutes, from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. Now, in the report, Colonel August Mercy says that he has used this low ground in the ravine to shelter his men as they load. And they pop up to the high ground, fire across at the Confederates, drop back down to the low ground to reload. Reports are sometimes inaccurate and confused, and I've been out here and I've looked down and thought I wouldn't want to pop up and down out of this ravine, but maybe those guys did. Regardless, by 2 o'clock, the Confederate pressure on this position is growing to be too great. Ammunition is starting to fail. One of the lessons Grant takes away from his experience at Fort Donelson is how quickly men on the line of battle shoot through their ammunition. And when he arrives on this battlefield at 8:35 in the morning, first thing he does is start ordering ammunition wagons to the front to make sure these men stay supplied. The best of intentions. Those resupplies still fail at times, and it fails here for the men of MacArthur's brigade. 9th Illinois is going to get trapped in this ravine in front of us. The 50th and the 9th to their left are pushed back. Suddenly there's a whole mass of Confederates in this ravine shooting up their left flank. Colonel Mercy is going to take his 2 leftmost companies, wheel them off to the left so they can return fire. But again, these men are running out of ammunition. They're not able to stop the pressure that's building on them, and they are going to start breaking. And 9th Illinois is going to turn and try and claw their way back out of this ravine to the rear, and they're going to take incredibly heavy casualties as they do so. All told, 9th Illinois is going to lose right around 250 men in this ravine. By the end of the battle, 366 of their number will be casualties of war. Dead, killed, missing. They're dead, wounded, missing. A lot of those casualties occur here. Confederates, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. There are accounts of men saying that they were aiming for the spot on the Yankees' backs where their suspenders crossed. It is a bloodbath right here. And MacArthur's men are going to be in no shape to put up any kind of resistance for the rest of the afternoon. They will keep moving towards Pittsburg Landing at the rear, where they can try and rally what's left of the brigade and reform. MacArthur will send a message off to Hurlbut and tell him, we're retiring. Your left flank is going to be open again. You need to do something about that. At the same time, as MacArthur is getting that message over to Hurlbut, Johnston is closely observing what's happening on his front. He's in a low spot in Sarah Bell's farm, and he is sitting on top of his horse, Fire Eater. He is slowly looking from one end of the line to the other and back again, taking in as much information as he can. Where are his soldiers? What's the terrain look like? What's the rate of fire? How many casualties do they appear to have taken? How tired do the Federals look? Can I see any flags going down? Can I see anybody retiring from the battlefield? And after a few moments of him observing what's going on to the front, he turns to an aide and says, they're being stubborn. I must put the bayonet to them. And he is going to order a charge all across the line, a very concerted effort. Instead of these brigades individually attacking like they had been for much of the afternoon, they are going to move in unison with one another, and the hope is that will be enough pressure to finally push back this flank of the Federal Army. Just as Johnston's getting ready to organize this, send out the orders to his subordinates, the commander of the Reserve Corps, Brigadier General John Breckinridge, will ride up to him, say, "General, I have a Tennessee regiment that just won't charge." One of Johnston's aides is a volunteer aide, the Confederate governor of Tennessee, Isham Harris. And Harris, who's sitting with him, who is very sensitive to his state's reputation, will cut Johnston off and turn to Breckinridge and say, "Show me where that regiment is." Harris will ride off to rally his fellow Tennesseans and get ready to make this charge. Johnston will send Breckinridge off to the rest of his line with orders to move forward, and Johnston will ride out to his line and start rallying his men for one more attack at right around 2 o'clock. Earlier in the day, in the camp of the 18th Wisconsin, Johnston had picked up a tin cup as a way to rally his men. He claimed that this would be his share of the spoils. And he will ride down in front of some Arkansas men, and he will tell them, as he taps this tin cup to the bayonet tips, "These must do the work, men. They are stubborn. We must use the bayonet. I will lead you." And for as exhausted as these guys are, for as much fighting as they have done that day, that inspiration from their overall commanding general is enough. The Confederate line will surge forward, and Johnston will ride out, lead these men for about 200 yards, and he will finally successfully push back the Federal line. It's not a complete rout. Hurlbut is able to bring his men off fairly orderly, fall back a few hundred yards, and form another line. That'll be the direction we go. But by and large, the whole Federal flank is turning. Hurlbut is angling his line back away from the river. If that pressure can be sustained, Johnston might finally get to interpose his army between Grant's and the Tennessee River. Johnston will ride back to a high piece of ground directly across from us to observe what's happening. He will be initially alone shortly after 2 o'clock when the charge is successful, before his aides and staff start returning to him there. That's a very dramatic moment of the battle. All of us here who are familiar with it know what's coming next, but hold on to that thought for a minute. We're going to walk on to our next stop back by Bloody Pond, closer to our vehicles. They will reform here a couple hundred yards back from that first line, starting to angle off into the woods here to the northeast, the south end of Wicker Field. There's a little bit of a lull that falls over the battlefield at this point. Both sides are tired. They've been engaged since 11:30 in the morning, past 2 o'clock p.m. now. Fresh ammunition's coming to the front. There's a Federal battery that posts up here and starts taking Johnston's line across the way under fire. Now Johnston, back at that high point where we just left, he's sitting on his horse. His aides start returning to him. Isham Harris is one of the first back. He asks Johnston, "Are you all right?" Because Johnston shows him that the boot heel has been shot off of his boot. And Johnston kind of laughs and says, "They nearly put me hors de combat there." Little does Harris know that there has been a mortal blow struck by that time. Johnston, from that position, surveying the battlefield, he sees this Federal battery taking his men under effective fire. And he will tell Harris, "You ride out there and you tell Statham to flank that Federal battery." It's a 400-yard ride from where Johnston is. Sends Harris off. Harris rides 400 yards out, delivers the order, rides 400 yards back. It's getting close to 2:30 at this point. As he comes back, he finds Johnston slumped over his saddle. And he asks, "General, are you hurt?" And Johnston will reply, "Yes, and I fear seriously." With other aides, Harris will guide Johnston on his horse back down to a low spot in a ravine behind there. It takes Johnston out of any potential line of fire. It also takes him out of sight from the enlisted men, so they don't see that the general who just led them in a charge isn't doing so well. As they take Johnston off of his horse on the ground, they're searching for a wound on him. And if any of you have first responder medical training, you know when you're looking for what's going to kill you in the next few minutes, you're looking above your elbow, your torso, and above mid-thigh or so, where a lot of your vital organs are, the big arteries. And his staff are doing the same thing. They're ripping open his shirt. They're trying to find out where their general is injured. And they will see that spent rounds had struck him a couple of times on his torso. Nothing with enough force to break the skin, but it hurts and it leaves a nasty bruise. And Johnson keeps fading. Eventually he becomes unresponsive, and shortly after 2:30 he'll pass away. It turns out that he had been hit by a round behind his right knee. It had cut or torn a little bit of his popliteal artery. Now, he did have a tourniquet in his pocket, and a popular retelling has always been, if you apply that tourniquet, Johnston's saved. The outcome of the war in the West is different. You also have to take into account that when he gets back to get medical help from his doctor, if they're able to sew that artery back together, there's a 74% chance he lives. If they have to amputate, there's a 60% chance. So even if they get that tourniquet applied in time, it's not a guarantee that Johnston survives, but it does increase his chances. Harris, in the years afterwards, he will reminisce on this moment when Johnston passed away. He does leave an account, a first-hand account of what it was like when Johnston finally took his last breath there. It says, "In a few moments, he ceased to breathe. I did not consult my watch, but my impression is that he did not live more than 30 or 40 minutes from the time he received the wound. He died calmly, and to all appearances, free from pain. Indeed, so calmly that the only evidence I had that he had passed from life was the fact that he ceased to breathe, and the heart ceased to throb. There was not the slightest struggle, nor the contortion of a muscle. His features were as calm and as natural as at any time in life and health." Command of the Confederate Army will pass from Johnston to PGT Beauregard. The advance will continue. Those low-level officers, brigade commanders, and regimental commanders, they know what the battle plan is, and regardless of Johnston's presence or not, they are continuing to push forward. Federal line here will hold for a little while longer, but Hurlbut sees the writing on the wall. His men are tired. The line is stretched thinner. He's shuffling troops off to his left to try and counter the Confederate flanking maneuvers. He sends a message off to Prentiss on his right, says, "Stretch your line further, I'm being pushed back." Prentiss has like 1,100 men with him at this point. He can't stretch that far. By 4 o'clock, Hurlbut is pulling his units out and marching back towards the landing to take a position on Grant's last line of defense. Confederate brigades here will move forward and begin the encircling movement around the Hornet's Nest to force those men to surrender. Eventually they'll reorganize themselves and move back towards that last line, but that'll take time. Now, Johnston had been alive at that point. Would that reorganization have gone faster? Would it have been more efficient? Yeah, we'll never know. But it's fun to talk about, fun to think about. A lot of what ifs here at Shiloh. But Hurlbut and his experienced and inexperienced soldiers here, they had been able to buy enough time, even in the face of well-organized attacks by 2 p.m. On their position for Grant to establish his last line of defense. Hurlbut had done his job. It's his first experience under fire, and he performed better than other generals did during the war at this point. In spite of his own drunkenness. No evidence he was drinking here at the battle, but certainly in the weeks leading up to it, he hit the whiskey pretty hard. That kind of concludes the fighting here on the Federal left for this point. Fighting will continue at the Hornet's Nest until 6 o'clock p.m. or so. That noise is going to attract some of these units in that direction. Some, like Chalmers' brigade, are going to fall out of line to try and rest and get more ammunition before they get into the fight. And Beauregard is going to start trying to take more control over the battle now that he knows that he's in command. And the fighting will continue until sunset on April 6th. Y'all have any questions before I let you go on your way to your next stops?
How far are we from here to Pittsburg Landing?
Pittsburg Landing, you're looking less than a mile.
Less than a mile
or so, yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, there's still some ground to cover and a big ravine between here
big,
and there.
Big ravine.
Yeah.
Nasty ravine.
It is.
So they would have went through that ravine. They wouldn't have went around it anyway.
Confederates go through the ravine. Hurlbut, he's going to follow the road.
Okay, that's what I meant.
That's going to be fastest. And he will have enough time with the disorganization on the Confederate side as they encircle the Hornet's Nest. Some of his units stop in their campsites and clean their muskets. Disassemble them, clean the barrels out, get the fouling out before they move back on to the last line. So it's a slow process at that point. Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming out.